All right, so can everyone see the PowerPoint? One
Yes.
person can tell me, yes, thank you. Okay, all right, so Leah, you have a question? Leah
That was a
Rimbolo?
mistake.
Okay. Um, Thank you. There is a hand raising function, well done, in the bottom, along with other emojis. You can also type questions into the chat. Christiana will help me with that as well. And we're going to get started. I don't think we will take the whole time, but I do want to make sure we move through it and give you plenty of time to ask questions. So as we talked about, you should have this slide, which I have to change the title on, I'm noticing. I will fix that. This is 2023. The only thing I did not edit from last year. And the abbreviations page, the quick reference guide, and the actual survey. Okay. We are going to very briefly talk about not just the point in time, but also how folks can access the homeless service system. Some of you are new, so that will be helpful for you. Okay, so who's homeless? So when you think about the word homeless or a person who is homeless, you probably have an image come to your mind. And if you're not in the field of homeless services, you probably have a very distinct image. If you do this work every day, you probably have a sense of the fact that that can be more broad. But the reality is that who is homeless depends on who you ask. There are different definitions of homelessness. HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the federal government, has a distinct definition that only includes individuals or families who are sleeping in a place not meant for habitation, an emergency shelter, domestic violence shelter, or homeless transitional housing. So a lot of people in our world, people we come across, they're homeless. They don't have their own home, but they might not meet that definition. But we are going to do this survey for everybody. So that's okay. But just so you're clear that that is the federal government's definition, and it ties to a lot of the funding that our community receives for homelessness. They also have a regulation or act that they call the McKinney-Vento Act that does include a more expansive group, including those folks that fit the criteria for HUD, but also includes families and individuals who are doubled up, or what we call couch surfing, due to loss of housing. They're living in motels that they're paying for out of their own pocket. They might be living in a trailer park, kind of like in a camping situation, or youth abandoned in hospitals. Distinctly, though, children and young adults in foster care are not considered homeless by any definition if they are under the state's care and custody. Okay. And also, just for if anyone happens to come across this, youth in the youth shelter in Middlesex County are not homeless if they are there through the juvenile justice system or the DCP&P. So they are under a different authority, so they would not be considered homeless. But if they were actually homeless, maybe they had run away, then they would. For the purposes of the point in time, which is a activity that the federal government, Department of Housing and Urban Development asks us to do, homeless only includes those who meet the HUD definition. But we're going to do the survey for any of your program participants who are experiencing a housing crisis. So if someone is doubled up, that we're still going to do the survey for those individuals. Or they're paying for their own hotel or somehow very much precariously housed, we're still going to do that survey. Okay, in Middlesex County, and this will change a little bit this summer, but for now we're going to go with this, and then we'll do more trainings come this summertime. The way to access the homeless system in Middlesex County primarily would be to call 211. 211 is the statewide homeless hotline, and so individuals would be screened for assistance and appropriate referrals would be provided by 211 in order for them to access assistance. So for those of you who don't know, what happens when someone calls 211? They should follow the prompts for homelessness, and the individual on the 211 side will ask a series of questions to determine eligibility for different services. First, they're going to ask questions for diversion, meaning they're going to ask if there's anywhere else that the individual can stay, friends, family, any way that they can kind of help themselves with their own situation. They're going to go through that series of questions first. And that is because the shelter capacity in Middlesex County is extremely limited. There's actually only one shelter for families, one for single women, and one for men. And it is generally full 99% of the time. 211 will also then make a referral to an appropriate resource. So if the individual appears to be eligible for the Middlesex County Board of Social Services, they will be told to apply at the Board of Social Services for assistance, or they'll be told that Coming Home will be calling them back, and they will also be given other resources like soup kitchens, drop-in centers, anything else that might assist them. If it's a rental assistance question, they're going to be referred for rental assistance, whatever it is that they're asking for. With the exception of Code Blue, and we'll talk about that in a bit, there is no immediate placement in shelter. Code Blue is only when the temperatures are below 32 degrees. It's warming centers in different communities that are available only for the overnight hours to prevent loss of life due to the cold temperatures. But it is not technically a shelter. It is just an overnight warming center. Coming Home, for those who are referred to Coming Home, will follow up with everyone that 211 did not refer to the Board of Social Services to complete an assessment of their needs, ensure that they got proper referrals, and will include assigning to case management, adding to the shelter wait list if appropriate, referring for financial assistance, whatever else they might need. That call usually happens within 24 hours or the next business day. If a client does not have a phone, the homeless service agencies in our community will allow them to use their landline to make the call. And there are also street outreach staff who will also be able to assist. Feel free to jump in, type in the chat, or put your hand up or anything if you have any questions. After an individual calls 211, if they are potentially eligible for the Board of Social Services, meaning they are currently receiving TANF or GA, which is welfare, or SSI, which is disability income for individuals that have very low income or no work history, or they don't have any income at all, the client will be advised to report to the Board of Social Services as soon as possible to be screened. That's the old way. Currently, under pandemic, the Board of Social Services is still closed to the public. If that has changed, someone on here will tell me that, but I think that's still true. The client should apply online for welfare at that website that is there. And if they already have welfare or SSI, they can call that number to ask to be screened for emergency assistance. And I will just quickly tag Monica to say, did I get that right? I think that's what we're doing right now. Unless she had to step away. Yes, she says yes. Thank you, Monica. So that is, their building is closed. So don't send someone over to the Board of Social Services. They can apply. If they don't have benefits yet, they can apply at that website. If they do have TANF, GA, or SSI already, they can call that number to be screened for emergency assistance. If they were not eligible for the Board of Social Services, Coming Home is going to outreach the client the next business day by phone, complete the shelter pre-screening if that's what's appropriate, or refer for a diversion program, which is a case management program to help someone resolve their situation without going to shelter, or another case management program if that's what's the most appropriate. Coming Home will also assess for eligibility for other programs, and even if they need shelter and they can't be diverted, because the shelter space is limited and there's no immediate placement, they will still be offered case management while they're on the shelter waiting list. Okay, so that is very quickly, in a nutshell, how folks can access the homeless service system in our community. That will change. 211 will always be an option, but otherwise there will be other options come this summer. Okay, does anyone have any questions on that before we dive into the point in time? All right, so if you're looking at your actual survey page on the screen here, this is the first page. It is 2 pages, or maybe you printed it front and back. So this is the first page, the front side. The first page of the survey contains mandatory information for the completion of the survey. Specifically, all those boxes in gray must be completed or the survey will not be valid. Only one survey should be completed for each household or family. Of course, we don't expect you to know that if Garden State Homes is completing a survey for someone and then that person happens to wander over to Elijah's Promise, and they get a survey completed over there, that's okay. We have a way to deduplicate. So don't worry about that. That is not the most important thing. The most important thing is getting the survey done and getting the answers completed and following the instructions on the page. So pay attention to the instructions at the top of each section. So you will notice at the top of each question, it might say check all that apply or check only one. If you check more than one in the questions that say check only one, the survey is not valid, especially in the grade sections. So it's important to be sure that you follow those directions. It does seem like common sense, but there is a reason for everything I say in these, and that is because I've seen so many that have multiple answers checked where it says check only one. So we're going to go through each question. So feel free to follow along on the survey itself, as well as the guides that we provided. Also, a point of clarification, in New Jersey, Monarch Housing is the statewide point-in-time coordinator, and they provide all these materials with the exception of this PowerPoint. And also, the point-in-time is done throughout the entire country. It's a mandatory activity that we have to do. Everyone, all homeless service providers and continuums of care, which is the network of agencies that do these, do the point-in-time, provide homeless services, are required by HUD to do the point-in-time every year. So Monarch leads that effort in New Jersey, and Coming Home leads that effort here in Middlesex County in partnership with the Middlesex County Division of Housing. On your survey at the top, you will notice that there is a code, county, agency, and program right across the top. This is the header. This year, the survey is a PDF. It's a fillable document, but you are going to receive it if you are an agency or a municipal or county government program that normally participates and you're on our 2023 point-in-time agency list. You are going to receive this survey with the code and all of this information here filled out for you. You might just have to write in the name of your program. So for example, United Way of Central Jersey is on here, and I think they're still on our list of agencies. So that you will receive the survey in email with the code, county, and agency filled out for you. You'll need to write in the name of your program because there are usually more than one program at an agency. Okay, so hang tight. Don't just jump in and start doing these surveys today, because you're going to receive the survey with that filled out and additional instructions by email. And if you're new, we're still going to send this out to you. That's wonderful. And it will have a miscellaneous code on it, and that's fine. And you're just going to be sure to fill out the name of your program, and then we'll be sure to add you onto the agency list with your own code for next year. Okay, so long story short, you don't have to fill out this. It will be filled out for you. Okay, there is a Spanish version of the survey. We have not received it yet from Monarch Housing. As soon as we do, everything's going out to you. Okay. Underneath the header, you'll also see guidance in the administration of the survey, right under the title here. And it is a reminder that we are talking to individuals who are experiencing a crisis, being homeless or in a housing crisis of some kind. And the information that we are asking for is sensitive information, some of it. We want to be clear with them why we are asking them these questions, and that reminding them that this is completely confidential. And we're going to be empathetic to their situation and remembering ourselves that even asking these questions, the way that may be experienced by someone who's experiencing homelessness can be traumatic. So we do need to be mindful of that and sensitive to their responses. This is 100% voluntary for the individual, but it's important that we get it. So we do want to help them to tell us their story. The other thing to keep in mind when you're telling them why we're even doing this is that this information is used both locally here at the county level, all the way up through the state and the federal government to help plan for funding and services for individuals who are experiencing a housing crisis. So we absolutely use this data that we gather as a whole to help plan for assistance and to help create housing that will meet their needs that they can afford. Okay, so those are the reasons why. Now, on the right-hand side of this survey, you'll notice that there is a question that says, have you already completed or participated in the 2023 point in time survey, PIT survey? I don't care if they say yes or no. Feel free to just keep going, do the survey, because they may say yes, but maybe they didn't. They may say no, and maybe they did, because they didn't realize that they did it already, or it might be that an agency did it on their behalf. And that's okay. The system, we have a way of identifying and removing duplicates, so just go for it. Go ahead and do the survey, okay? We'll worry about the duplication. Any questions so far? Okay. So we're going to get into the survey questions. For those of you who have done this in the past, you will notice that the survey looks pretty different. There are a lot of the same questions, which are the mandatory questions that HUD asks us to gather. And there's some new questions, which I presumably were developed locally by Monarch Housing in collaboration with a group of consumers or formerly homeless individuals who helped to develop these questions. Please be sure that we get as much information as possible, as accurate as possible, being sensitive to the individual situation and to their nonverbal cues, even how they're responding, and make sure that you're sensitive to that. The first page contains some primary information that is 100% needed to complete the survey, and without it, it won't be considered valid. That is those gray boxes. In doing the entire survey, you will use the quick reference guide and the abbreviation sheet. That will help you tremendously. I would recommend that you familiarize yourselves with the quick reference guide in advance of even asking the first question to the first person, because it will be helpful to you to be very familiar with it before you dive into it. Follow the directions for each question. We talked about this. If it says check one only, please check one only. When you're asking a question that says check one only, do not read through the entire list of questions or the entire list of responses. Ask them the question if you need to, because you've already started engaging in a conversation with them and you might have discovered the answer just by talking to them. This should be done very conversationally, in a non-threatening way. Offer resources if you can. If you're not sure what to do, you can, if nothing else, you can refer to 211. You can also take the person's information and offer to call them with additional information, and then email us to ask us questions, and that would be okay too, and we can point you in the right direction. Again, if nothing else and you want to give someone something on the spot, you can refer them to 211. If the question instruction says check all that apply, then you can read the entire list of possible options to the individual, because they may tell you one thing, but it might be that something else on that list is also true. So you would can feel free to give them all the answer choices and let them choose what makes sense to them. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. Again, this is done as a conversation. Don't just go through and read them questions. Have a conversation with them about their situation. Let them tell you their story, and that will be the best way to gather this information and the least threatening way for them. For families and individuals residing at Ozanam Family Shelter or the it should also say, or Ozanam Men's Inn or the Domestic Violence Shelter, you should know that those surveys are already completed, because we will pull their information out of the Homeless Management Information System, or HIMIS. So if you come across someone that tells you they're living in one of those shelters specifically, then you would not have to complete the survey. If you are here and you are from one of those shelters, I should say Ozanam is the only shelter, the two Ozanams, that it will come out of the HIMIS system. The domestic violence shelter, you will do the paper surveys, because obviously your information is not in the HIMIS system for confidentiality and safety. Okay. So Women Aware staff, you'll do these surveys for the folks that are there on the night of the 24th, and additional directions are going to be sent out to all shelters as well. Okay, so you'll notice the layout of the survey. If you're looking at the survey document itself, it's kind of like three columns, and then moving from left to right. So the first column on the left has question 1 and 2. Okay, that's the first column on the left. So question 1, this is where we already get different from last year. What services that you or anyone in your household would like to receive or that you need? Check all that apply. So you're talking to someone and what kinds of things might help them in their current situation. If you check other, which is an option at the bottom, you then would need to handwrite in something more specific. So if they don't say any of those things, but they say they need, I don't know, dental care, then you're going to check other and write in dental care. Or maybe they need furniture or transportation, and those are not options on here. So you're going to handwrite that in. Okay. So we're going right in with what services do they need. So it might be helpful that you have an idea of what services you can give them referrals for. And if you aren't sure, again, refer them to 211. We would expect that almost everyone you're talking to would answer that they need housing, right? Because that is why we're doing this. So we're going right in with what services they need on question 1. Underneath that, on the sheet, question 2, this is talking about barriers to assistance. So what issues have they encountered, or what barriers have they struggled with in trying to access services, regardless of what kind of service? We're not talking about housing. It says services. Check all that apply. Again, this is a list that you can read to them all of the options, and you can also ask them if they had any additional issues or challenges in receiving assistance. Okay? Again, let them, this is very open-ended. You can read this list to them, but also let them tell you their story. All right. So this is a new question. I'm pretty excited about it, actually, because it would be great to see what the individuals out there are saying is their biggest barriers. All right. It is not limited to only one. We want to know everything that they're struggling with, that it would lead to them resolving their crisis. Okay. Again, if you use other, you would need to write in the actual thing that is that they specify. All right, question 3. Now we're getting into required information. Okay.
Everyone got it, or almost everyone got it. If you did not, please let me know by email, and I will send you a PowerPoint after the meeting to get you caught up. Diane, that includes you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure who that was, but all these materials can be forwarded as well. Okay, I did see a couple of new people joined, and that's great. This is being recorded, so you can also refer back. We'll send out the recording as soon as it's up. So we are on question 3 of the survey, which is on the first page, and it's in the center of the page. Where did you spend the night on the night of January 24th, 2000? That's a Tuesday. So in most cases, you will be doing the surveys starting on the 25th, because that's the day after the 24th, which is the night we're talking about. Okay. So when you're talking to people, you're asking them, where did they spend the night on the night of Tuesday, January 24th? Most of us will conduct the survey on the 25th and for the following several days thereafter. You're not asking them where they spent the night last night, unless it is January 25th. You are asking them, maybe you're interacting with someone on Friday after the point in time, and you want to know where they spent the night on Tuesday. It's very specific because it is a point in time. It is a snapshot of that one day in our community, okay? And that will be the same night that everyone in New Jersey will be asking about, okay? So please note, this says check one only. If you check more than one answer, then the entire survey is not valid. So it's very important that you only check one answer in question number 3. I'm going to go through some of these answer choices so that we're very clear on what they mean. The first one, you'll notice they have headers. Don't worry about the headers, okay? That's for someone else to worry about. Homeless, so these criteria fit the, remember we talked about the HUD definition of homelessness versus other definitions. These locations fit the HUD definition of homelessness. On the street, under a bridge, abandoned building, and so on, basically any place not meant for habitation. If someone says that they're staying in an attic, a garage, a basement, you need to ask some additional clarifying questions. A lot of you have known me for a long time, and you know that I will tell a story about a child of mine that lives in the basement. And for those of you who have known me for a long time, you've known that that individual has been in the basement for since I've been doing these trainings. However, he is no longer in the basement. He actually moved out. So anyway, but while he was in the basement, he would not be considered homeless because where he stayed in the basement had carpeting, it had walls. Yes, someone put a little emoji of a party. Yeah, so while he was in the basement, he had carpeting, walls, he had access to water, he had access to heat. It was a finished area of the basement. He had his Xbox. He was living the life. So he would not have been considered homeless. But when I got cranky because he was loud at 4 a.m. playing Xbox, had I decided to shut off the power to the space and kicked him over to where the washer and dryer are in the basement, which is cement floor, cinder block walls, no heat, and restricted access to the bathroom and the kitchen, now that would be homeless because that is not a livable situation. So if someone does tell you that they're staying in a building, if it's an abandoned building, if they're staying in the hallway of a building, and this is happening, folks, if they're staying in the hallway of an abandoned building or a hallway of a rooming house, even if they're staying in a parking garage, if they're staying in someone's attic, but it's not a living space, truly a living space, if they're staying in someone's basement, garage, whatever it may be, if it's not a space that has adequate facilities, right, then that is a place not meant for habitation. Okay, so we're very clear on that, right? So if they say, well, I'm staying in a building or I'm staying in this garage or whatever it may be, you need to ask some additional questions about that space. Does it have heat? Does it have, do you have access to the kitchen and the bathroom? Okay, so you want to be sure that it is a space that would be adequate. All right. The next one, emergency shelter. There are only 2 at this point in Middlesex County, Ozanam Family Shelter or the Ozanam Men's Inn. So the family shelter obviously houses families. It also houses single women and couples without children. The men's shelter houses single men. Those are the 2 emergency shelter facilities in Middlesex County. That is different. There is one other, which is a rotating network of churches that is operated by a local ministry in New Brunswick. If they tell you they stayed in one of those shelters, then we will have a survey for them. But if you still feel like you should do it, that's okay, because you might even get additional information that we didn't get through the shelters. So we'll be able to deduplicate. So that's okay. All right. And for those of you who have been around a long time, Fish Hospitality is no longer in operation. So that is no longer a shelter that operates in Middlesex County. They actually shut their doors. Code Blue Warming Center. We talked about that already. It's generally sponsored by a municipality. It's a pop-up overnight warming center, but it is not an official shelter. So in New Brunswick, it's located at Unity Square, which is a Catholic Charities building, but it's operated by the city of New Brunswick. And in Perth Amboy, it is located at the Jankowski Center on Olive Street. And it is sponsored by the city, but staffed by the Y. And your municipality or another municipality may also have a warming center. Those are the 2 that I'm definitely sure, if we have a code blue on the night of the point in time, those 2 will be open for sure. Just so it's not listed in print here, but on the question answers, youth shelter, we talked about that. Almost none of the youth at the Middlesex County Youth Shelter are homeless. They are usually there through juvenile justice or DCP&P. Okay. Domestic violence shelter, I think that's self-explanatory. transitional housing, to be clear, that is a program. It is not just a temporary or transitional place that they stay. The transitional housing location is a program. In Middlesex County, that is only Sanford Bates House or Garden State Homes has one. So individuals in those locations will have the survey completed for them already, but you can still feel free to do one just in case to make sure that we get them. Okay, but it is run by a nonprofit. It is just not like, oh, I'm staying here temporarily. That's not transitional housing. Okay. Transitional housing for domestic violence, that is not something we have in Middlesex County. So on your paper, feel free to cross it out. We don't have it. It does not exist in Middlesex County. Okay. If they say they're staying with Women Aware as a domestic violence program, you would want to clarify if it's the shelter or if Women Aware does have a few permanent housing apartments. Those are not transitional. Okay. So just to be clear. Hotel paid by an agency. So that is different than a hotel or motel that someone is paying for out of their own pocket or that a family friend is helping them pay for. So the difference there is that an institution of some kind, an agency, a nonprofit, a town, or a house of worship, or any institution is paying for the hotel for the individual, that falls into this category under the homeless heading. If an individual is paying for it themselves out of their own pocket or a friend or family member, that goes, if you'll notice, look down a little bit under permanent housing / at risk. It says hotel or motel that you paid for. So if they tell you they stayed in a hotel, you do need to ask a clarifying question, which is, did someone assist you in paying for that hotel? And if they say yes, you say, okay, can you tell me who that was? And if they name an agency or a church or something, then that is the homeless one, hotel or motel paid for by agency. If they say my grandma helped me, then that's the one below that. Okay, permanent housing / at risk, hotel or motel you paid for. Okay, is everyone clear on that? If you have any questions, now is the time. Okay, go ahead, Alejandra.
So for Women Aware, if we have clients in hotel placement that we've placed, do we still check off domestic violence shelter or hotel paid for by agency?
I think last year we went with domestic violence shelter,
Okay,
and that's fine.
thank you.
Okay, yep. Any other questions? Okay, so you'll notice in my,
Robin, it's Monica.
go ahead.
We work with Agape House out of county. How do you want us to handle them?
We're not doing Agape House because they'll do their own, and we'll get that information from Agape House
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
because they're located in Somerset.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Now, if someone is squatting, this is not on the list, right? Because it's not really a thing, but it is. If someone is squatting in a hotel or they're squatting in someone else's room in a hotel, but they're not paying for it themselves. So if John Smith is in a hotel and the Board of Social Services is paying for his room, and his buddy from down the street that he used to be out on the streets with, he's letting him stay in his room, which, by the way, is completely against the rules. We're still going to check off hotel paid for by an agency. Okay, so if someone's squatting in a hotel where they're not supposed to be, and the person who is supposed to be in that room is having that room paid for by an institution of some kind, then we're going to still check off hotel or motel paid for by an agency. Okay? Any questions on that? Okay, and then the last one in this grouping of homeless is safe haven. Cross it out. Do whatever you need to do so you don't use it. It is not the same thing as a domestic violence program. It is a HUD term that does not apply in Middlesex County. We do not have a safe haven. Okay? Now, if you look down the list, those are probably the most confusing answer choices. But if you look down the list, we talked about under permanent housing / at risk, hotel or motel you paid for. We talked about that. Permanent housing. So they're in housing. They have their own apartment. Now, if they tell you that they're in an apartment, you might ask them if they have any assistance in helping to pay for the apartment. And if they say they get assistance through the Board of Social Services, if they say TRA or temporary rental assistance, Board of Social Services, welfare is helping me, any of those things. That's that second one, apartment paid for with temporary rental assistance. If they say Section 8 or the county, you want to ask clarifying information just to make sure you understand. That's just permanent housing. So the only thing, if they're in an apartment, that would be different than permanent housing is if the apartment is being paid for with assistance from the Board of Social Services. Okay? So you can ask that clarifying question. A lot of times I get a question, maybe the insurance company is helping them pay for a place they are staying temporarily because they had a fire, for example, or they were displaced from their home and the insurance is paying for them to be in a hotel or in an apartment temporarily. That's still going to fall into this permanent housing / at-risk category because it's tied to their permanent housing. So if the insurance company is paying for the hotel, then that's here in this at-risk group. If the insurance company is paying for an apartment for them, that's under permanent housing. If someone is displaced by a fire and the Red Cross is paying for their hotel, now we're up under the homeless category, hotel or motel paid for by an agency. Okay? Any questions on those? Okay, if you keep going down, staying with friends or family, that's self-explanatory. A lot of times people stay with friends and family one night at a time and then they're on to the next house, but that's still staying with friends or family. Farm labor housing, we do not have that in Middlesex County, so you can cross that out. And everything else underneath under institution should be really self-explanatory. Please note the difference between psychiatric hospital and medical hospital. Those are two different answer choices, and also is different from substance abuse treatment. Everything else is self-explanatory. If you cannot figure out what to check and you check other at the bottom, you have to write in what other is. But I can promise you 99% of the time, the answer is in the list given to you. So if you check off other and you write in rooming house, I'll tell you what, that was supposed to be permanent housing. Okay? If they are staying in a rooming house that they are paying for themselves or the Board of Social Services is helping them, it's permanent housing or apartment paid for with temporary rental assistance. That's also, if the board is helping them, that's a rooming house. Okay? So rooming house is not other. It's one of those two options. The only other thing that you might check if someone is at Edison Job Corps, that really doesn't quite fit on any of those, that you could use other for because it doesn't really fit anywhere else. And that is the only thing that I can think of that you would check off other. All right. Any questions on this? This is probably one of the most important questions on the entire survey, which is why we spend so much time on it. Okay. So now you're moving to the right on the survey, and you are at the top right of the column. And it's number 4, and this pertains to question number 3. As we get into questions 4, 5, and 6, they relate back in some way to each other. So question 4 is related to question 3. In what town did you spend the night? On the night of January 24th, on Tuesday night, 2023. So whatever you said that you were, where you were in question number 3, what town was that in? It also asks for state and county. Do your best. If it's in New Jersey, but you're not sure if it was in Middlesex County or not, but you have the town, just put New Jersey in the town. We can figure it out. Okay. Of course, there are multiple Monroes and multiple Washington townships and so on, but we'll try to figure it out. If the location was a specific program, like a shelter or transitional housing program, you will also write in the name of the program or the agency. If it was not, then those 2 rows are left blank. Okay. So for example, if they say that they stayed in a hotel and that hotel was paid for by the Board of Social Services, you're going to put the town the hotel was in, and you're going to put the agency, the Board of Social Services there. Okay. As an example. All right. So are there any questions about this? Okay. Question number 5 and 6 are also required. Question number 5 pertains back again to question number 3, which is how long have they been in that location where they said they were staying on January 24th? So if they said they were staying in a hotel being paid for by an agency, how long was the agency paying for that hotel? It doesn't have to be, by the way, that very specific hotel, because sometimes people change hotels all under the billing of an agency. So for example, if someone is in a hotel that's being paid for by the Board of Social Services, they may have been in a few hotels in a row being paid for by the Board of Social Services. So you want the whole grouping of time that they were in a hotel paid for by the board. For example, it doesn't matter that they've only been in that hotel for a few days. Maybe for 3 months before that, they were in another hotel still being paid for by the Board of Social Services. So it's the category that matters. If they're staying with friends and family, but they're couch surfing, so if they're going from house to house, how long have they been doing that consecutively? Okay. That is the answer. It is not that, oh, I was at grandma's house for the last 2 nights, because before that they were at their friend's house for a few months. So it's the whole amount of time that they were in that category of a response. Does that make sense to everyone? Are there any questions on how to answer number 5? Okay. Number 6 is looking at the last year. So you're looking back to January of 2022. How many months in total during that year did they spend on the streets or in some other place not meant for habitation, in an emergency shelter, or a hotel paid for by an agency, or you could also include a domestic violence shelter here, and cross out in a safe haven because that's not an option. So in the last 12 months, how many months have they been on the streets or other place not meant for habitation in total, all the time added up? And how many total months have they been on the streets or in some kind of shelter or hotel paid by an agency? So, and you can come off mute for this or type it into the chat. What can this column not add up to? Alejandra?
13.
13. Somebody said 13. Great. It can't be 13 or 14 or anything higher than 12. I hope that makes sense because we are only looking at the last 12 months. And some of you might be laughing and thinking, why is she saying that? Because you would be surprised at the responses that we get. So number 6 cannot add up to more than 12. If they have never been on the streets or in a shelter of any kind or a hotel paid for by an agency, you're going to put in 0. That would be okay. So don't leave anything blank. If the answer is 0, you put 0. Okay? Any questions? All right. Now the worst question of the entire survey, except for maybe question 10. But this is the worst question for the survey, in my opinion. I think it's the worst for the individuals who we are talking to. And it's the hardest for us to try to help them to answer. Because HUD asks us to ask them how many separate, distinct times they have been on the street or in a place not meant for habitation, in some kind of shelter or safe haven, which we don't have, in the last 3 years. So you're going back to January 24th, 2020, more or less. I don't remember where I was on January 24th, 2020, so I can't expect them to have a full accounting of their whereabouts for the last 3 years, especially if they've been in a housing crisis that almost that entire time. A lot of the individuals that we're talking to that would have a lot of episodes of homelessness or have been homeless consecutively for the whole time will have a harder time possibly telling that story. And so we're going to help them to tell this story to the best of their ability. For your information, a homeless episode means it is a distinct period of time consecutively where someone is on the streets or in a shelter. So if they're going from street to a shelter or hotel paid for by an agency back to street, that is consecutive. It doesn't matter. It's different locations. It's not about where they were. It was all in a homeless location. Now let's say they did 6 months combined between street and shelter. And then they went to grandma's house for a couple weeks. And then they ended up back on the street. Now we're in another episode of homelessness because it is new. It is a distinct new time that we are looking at. So when you're talking to them, you want to help them to tell their story. And you kind of can help them starting with today and looking back, or you can start with 3 years ago and looking forward. Ways to help them to benchmark their time would be holidays, seasons of the year, temperature outside, cold, warm, kids were in school, kids were on break, they were in camp, whatever it may be, all right? Different things that would be benchmarks. For a lot of the folks, especially if we're interacting with them out on the streets, we might have discussion around, oh, I was in the hospital. Okay, do you remember when you got out of the hospital? And if they don't really remember, say, okay, was it cold outside or was it warm outside? Was there a holiday around that time? Same thing with jail. Okay, they don't always remember the exact dates, and they can't be expected to because this is kind of a crazy question. And what this does is it helps us to figure out who fits the definition of what HUD calls chronically homeless, which you don't need to know, but it basically is someone who's consecutively homeless for 12 or more months straight and is still homeless today and has a disability, or someone who has 4 or more separate episodes of homelessness adding up to 12 or more months over the last 3 years. So that's why we ask this question. Don't ask them how long or how many times they've been homeless, because if they haven't been in their own home for the last 3 years, they're going to tell you they've been homeless for 3 or more years. The thing is, though, that doesn't fit this criteria. It doesn't answer this question. This question is very specific to how much time they've been on the streets or in a shelter or agency or hotel paid for by an agency. So I'm not saying this is easy. It is not easy. It is very difficult. It can be traumatic for the individual that we're talking to. So you're really just helping them to tell their story, being empathetic to the conversation, and doing your best to answer this. This is the hardest question for the point in time. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Monica?
So what we're actually filling in there is the number of months or the time?
Yes.
The number of
Nope,
months.
number of months. So let's say in my example, right, we had someone who was street and shelter combined for 6 straight months. We're going to put 6 under episode 1. We're going to use that as like this episode. And before that, they were at grandma's house for a couple weeks. So that doesn't count because they were at grandma's house. Before grandma's house, they were on the street. So however long they were on the street before they got to grandma's house, that would be episode 2. And we would put the number of months there.
Okay.
Does that make sense to everyone? That's a good question. So it's not the number of episodes. Those are already outlined here for you. Episode 1, 2, 3, and so on. It's the number of months they spent in each episode. It's also the episode, not the location, because you could have a group of locations that all fit the criteria. And if it's consecutive, then that goes there as one episode. This one is hard. Are there any other questions? Feel free to ask if this is the hardest question. Okay, I'm going to move on, but if you do have questions, I will leave a little time at the end as well for additional questions. All right, we are still on the first page. Question number 8 is below the episodes question. Where was your last permanent address before becoming homeless? So to be clear, this is not always the same place where they were, and it's not always in the same town where they stayed on January 24th. So if they're on the streets in New Brunswick on January 24th, their last permanent address was not necessarily New Brunswick. So a lot of times this will be a different location. Okay. What we know from the data is that a lot of people stay in or near their home communities, but a lot don't. So they might have been down in Monroe and now they're on the streets in New Brunswick. So this is their last permanent address. If If it's a younger person or even someone that's just always struggled with some kind of issue, they might not have had their own housing, but maybe they were securely housed with their parents or a family member or friend for a long period of time. And then they got kicked out and now they're on the streets. So you want the last permanent address where they were basically secure. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. We do have folks that have come here from other countries, which is why country is one of the rows here. But you want to get as much information, as much detail here as possible. If they're in the United States and they're in New Jersey, you definitely want to try to get at least the town as well, if that was their last permanent address. I don't expect you to get the county from Georgia. Okay? Any questions on that one? All right. Question 9, this is new. For those of you who don't know, folks have started to come here from the border, and we already had individuals here that were looking for assistance in getting immigration resolved, and now we have more folks coming who are seeking asylum. So this is a new question. So please just ask them if they are looking for assistance in obtaining a green card, dealing with immigration issues, seeking asylum. Again, when asking this might make someone nervous. So remind them the survey is anonymous and confidential. The results cannot be tied back to them directly. And we are only trying to figure out how best to help folks. And this information will, as an aggregate number, will be taken back probably to the state so that additional resources can be put into these types of services. It would be great if we also had information to give them to help them to follow up with a referral. We will send out, I can think of one possible referral right now, but if you want to assist them, if they really want this assistance, you can get their information and follow up with them with a referral. You can then reach out to us and ask us. We'll try to get a couple of referrals and send them out as well in advance. Okay. All right. We are now on to page 2. Okay. So page 2, there's one gray section. This is mandatory as well, and it must be completed or the survey will not be accepted. As a reminder, there's only one survey for each household or family. And when you're doing this particular one, a lot of the answer codes, which are also on your abbreviations sheet, are within the header area, which is helpful. But you should, when you're doing the survey, have the abbreviation sheet and the quick reference guide with you so you can just check. Okay. When we're talking about a household, you're talking about the household that, if they were not homeless, would be living together. So you might have a family that is staying, like a mom and her child are staying with her parents. But the homeless household is the mom and the child. So you're not also listing her parents as part of that household, unless they're all staying with someone and they would all be moving on together. Okay. So basically the household that you are surveying is the household who will be living together in their own home, ideally someday, not everybody in the house if they're couch surfing. So I hope that makes sense. When doing this, pay attention to the codes available at the top. You must use those codes. For one thing, there's not enough room to write in full words in these boxes. Use the codes. Also, for example, the code for African American or Black is B for the race. It is not AA for African American, okay? The code they've given us is B for Black. So please use the codes provided, or you leave me to my own devices to try to figure out what you mean, all right? And this entire section must be completed. So we're gonna go over this. This is the second hardest for the entire survey, okay? After this, it's only 2 more questions. So we are in question number 10, and this is at the top of page 2. And this is the demographics and characteristics of all the family members for the family that will be living together if their homelessness were resolved tomorrow in their own place. Okay. So you will see on the left-hand side of this area, it is the demographic information, is relationship to head of household, the individual's initials, their age, gender, race, and ethnicity. And on the right-hand side is different characteristics that apply to each person. you'll notice that this one says check all that apply to each person. So you will give them all the choices. And these are different disabling conditions as well as a subpopulation, domestic violence, and a veteran. Okay. We're going to go through this. So the first column in the demographic information is the relationship to head of household. Please use the guide above in the header. Do not just make up your own relationships because that's not helpful. Self is usually the person you're talking to. Okay. It is the head of household. And it is usually an adult, unless there are no other adults in the household at all. And it doesn't matter to me which adult in the household. Okay. It's whoever you're talking to. Whoever you have determined in your conversation is the head of household. So let's say you're talking to a 25-year-old young lady and she has a 2-year-old child. And let's say that she also has her 55-year-old mom as part of her household. The relationships that you specify for that family are based on who you identified as the head of household. So if the 25-year-old young lady is the head of household, then her 2-year-old is a child, okay, is the child in the household based on the relationship to head of household box above. And her 55-year-old mom is parent. And this can get confusing because the young lady you're talking to is the parent of the minor child. But the relationship of her mom to her, because she is the head of household, is parent. So now let's flip that. Let's say you're talking to the 55-year-old and she, in her household, is her 25-year-old daughter and her 2-year-old grandchild. Since you are talking to the older person, and that is the self, the person identified as the head of household, the 25-year-old young lady is now child because it is the child of the person you identified as the head of household. And now the minor 2-year-old is relative because there's no grandchild on here, right? So that's relative. So it all matters around who you identified as the head of household. It is not about how old the people are. It is not about anything else. It is who is the head of household in this survey. And everything else stems from that. So a couple of other things. In this survey, spouse refers to any partner of any kind. Okay. They don't have to be legally married. If that is the partner, that is spouse. And child is, again, about the relationship, not the age. So don't get lulled into calling everyone under the age of 18 a child, because they are a child, but it is not what this is for this survey. Okay. So our other answer choices are sibling. Again, that would be the sibling of the head of household. So you might have several minor children. They are each other's siblings, but they are not the siblings of the head of household. So you're not writing sibling there. Okay. Relative is any other blood, foster, or adoptive relationship that is not otherwise specified by parent, child, spouse, and sibling. And friend is like roommates, so non-relation through any kind of familial relationship. And unknown, I would suggest that you not use that because that is not helpful and not probably, you can probably figure that out by having additional conversation with the person. They know who they're living with. Okay. So are there any questions around relationship here? Okay. All right. Moving across, you will notice that we are using people's initials to identify them. So first initial of the first name, first initial of the middle name. And please note, it is the first 2 letters of the last name, not 1. It is 2 letters of the last name because this helps us with deduplication. So if we have John A. Smith, and you just write John A. S., age 40, male, Black, non-Hispanic. But next door, someone was talking to let's say someone was talking to Joseph, I don't know, smoke, age 40, male. Actually, that's not Joseph A. Sherrod. And you have JAS instead of JASH. And everything else is the same. We won't be able to differentiate. So do your best to always include the first 2 letters of the last name, because that helps us to differentiate between all the Johns and Josephs, 40-year-old men in New Brunswick. Okay? So 2 letters of the last name. Their age, all of these are required. If they don't know or they're not telling you their age, do your best to approximate the age. Okay? If they seem to really be confused about that, you can give them some benchmarks. You can give them windows. Okay, do you think you're in your 40s or 50s? That's fine. Really, this helps us to determine adults from children. So you do want to get an age in there. All right? And it can be approximate if they really don't know. But I've never had that happen in more than 10 years. Gender. You have choices for gender in the box above in the header. You have male and female. You have transgender. You have non-binary, questioning, or other. So you'll have to ask. Race and ethnicity. As you need to answer both of those. So you might put B/NH. So not Hispanic or Hispanic. So you want to answer both. All right. When someone says they are Hispanic or Latino, the federal government says they are also a race, which is not the same thing as being Hispanic or Latino. So if they just insist they are just Hispanic, then the default is probably going to be white. But if that is blatantly obvious because you are facing the person that is not the case, you should fill it in appropriately. Don't just randomly pick something, but do your best to answer, and you should list all that apply. Okay? So they might be multiracial, and you should list all the races that they identify. Okay? And you must also say whether or not they are Hispanic or not. Okay? If you have any questions on this whole section, you have to do this whole section for every person listed in the household. All right, any questions? Okay, I don't know what just happened. Okay. All right, continue moving across to the right, still in question 10. Now we're talking about disabling conditions and whether or not someone is fleeing domestic violence or has served in the armed forces in the United States, to be clear. So you're going to be asking if they or anyone in their household has any mental health challenges and or struggles with substance abuse. And I might say in my conversation with them, again, trying to be sympathetic and conversational. 1 second, Brenda, I'll answer that. I might say, do you have any challenges with like depression or anxiety? So many people in this country do, right? So we're going to start out with like probably the least stigmatized, right? And if they say no, I'm saying, okay, any other mental health issues, like bipolar or schizophrenia or anything like that. So you're going to kind of get to it. And they might still say no. I'm going to say one thing about that. If they say no to everything, you know something about that individual because that individual is in your program. And let's say you are a mental health provider and you know what that person's diagnosis is, and they're telling you they don't have a mental health issue, but you know, in fact, that they do, then you're going to check yes there. You're going to put a check mark there. Okay? That's true for all of these. If you know for a fact that something is true, then you will check it off, even if the client is telling you otherwise. You can use the quick reference guide. It gives you definitions and descriptions of each of these conditions. And as we move across, fleeing domestic violence, that is not, are they a victim? It is, are they actively fleeing? So if they are currently in Women Aware, in the safe house, or in a hotel being paid for by Women Aware, that would be a yes. That is a check right there. When you are asking them about their veteran status, please ask them if they've ever served in the United States military. Don't just ask them if they are a veteran, because a lot of times individuals who have served in the military, if they know that they're not eligible for veterans benefits for some reason, they might say no. So the question is, have they served in the US military? And if they say yes, you're going to check that off. Lastly, and very important, all the way to the right, is none apply. So if none of these checkboxes are happening for that individual in that household, you will check none apply. Do not just leave it blank. Actually check none apply if none of that is true for that person. And you have to do this for each person in the household. There was a question in the chat about whether or not we do this survey for individuals who are undocumented, and the answer is yes. The survey should be done for anybody that you encounter who is experiencing a housing crisis in your line of work. Okay. Alejandra, did you still have a question or did I answer it?
No, I do have a question. So just going back quickly to race and ethnicity, if we have a client who identifies as Black non-Hispanic, how would we fill that in for non-Hispanic?
It's NH.
NH, okay.
So you would put, yeah, is that not, I don't have it in front of me. Is it in the box above at the top?
Mm-hmm.
Does it say race?
Yep.
Like it has like codes for race. It doesn't have anything for Hispanic or not Hispanic.
It has it for Hispanic, but not Hispanic.
That's interesting. Okay, it's NH. Thank you.
Thank you.
I did not notice that.
Mhm.
Okay. Yep. Not Hispanic would be NH. Okay. I didn't notice that. So thank you, because I will go fix that. I can't fix the survey, but I can fix the instructions. Okay. Any other questions on question number 10? As much detail as possible while being respectful and empathetic, right? All right. We're in the final stretch here, guys. Last two. Everyone will be very happy to know that they are no longer asking for the actual amount of a person's income. However, we do want to know what income they receive and also what non-cash benefits they receive. Okay. So for income and non-cash benefits, it says check all that apply. So that means you can read this list to them. What income do you receive? And if in the conversation you have not already identified this, or even if you have, you will say, is there any other income that you receive? So for example, do you get SSI? Do you get alimony? Do you get temporary state disability? Give them the whole list. Let them say yes or no to each thing. If they say they have no income, then you have to check off no source of income. Okay? Don't just leave this blank, because that doesn't tell us anything. Every single piece of information in the survey we use for planning purposes. So please don't leave it blank. Same thing for non-cash benefits. This includes health insurance, public benefits, as well as food stamps, VA, WIC, and so on. So a few things for those who don't know. And I want to leave time for questions, so I'm just going to do this fast. There also in your quick reference guide, you have descriptions of each of these items. Okay. SSI, that's a disability benefit for individuals with very low income or who did not have enough of a work history and/or to qualify for SSDI. Okay, so SSI stands for Supplemental Security Income. SSDI is Social Security Disability Income, and that is disability, also a check cut by the Social Security Administration for individuals that have enough of a work history to qualify. Social Security on the right is retirement Social Security, and that is also where we are going to put survivors benefits. Okay, so you're gonna if someone gets survivors benefits, it will go under Social Security. Okay, work income. If they are a day laborer, that is work, so you would check off work income. If they are engaged in some kind of activity that is that they put effort into that generates income, then that is work income. Okay. Veterans pension. If they say they get a veterans pension or under non-cash benefits that they get VA medical benefits, then I would assume that on page 1, or no, I'm sorry, on the question 10 up above, that you have checked off that the individual said yes to serving in the US military, because otherwise they would not be receiving anything from the VA, right? So some of these things you're able to cross-check with each other. Let's see. Don't think on non-cash benefits where it says Section 8, public housing, ongoing rental assistance. Do not assume that if someone has Section 8, that means they are housed. They might have Section 8, but they don't, they're looking for an apartment. They haven't found one yet. Okay. So do not assume that just because they have a benefit, that means they're housed. If they get no non-cash benefits, so no food stamps, no health insurance, that's a public benefit, you're checking receiving no government benefits. Okay. Alicia, hold your question for 1 second, okay? But we're going to come back to it. Any other questions on this income non-cash benefits section? Again, it is check all that apply, and it applies to everyone in the household. Okay. Last question. Check all that apply. So you can give them all these possible answer choices. Yes, you're going to read them the list. What was the primary factor that contributed to or caused your current living situation? So why are they in this situation? Please do not only check off eviction. Do not only check off other. If they say eviction, you want to have additional conversation. People get evicted for a reason. Same thing with foreclosure. Foreclosures happen for a reason. It doesn't just happen out of the blue, right? If someone was evicted, they were evicted usually because they didn't pay the rent. If they didn't pay the rent, there's a reason for that too. Was it because the rent was increased and it went over their income, they couldn't afford it anymore? Was it because they lost their job? Was it because they lost their benefits, so they couldn't afford their housing anymore because the benefit was paying for their housing? So get to the root cause of it. You can check more than one answer, but please get to the root cause of their situation. Eviction, I wish it wasn't even a choice, because it does not happen magically out of the blue. Okay, same thing with foreclosure. The rest of the answer choices are pretty self-explanatory. You can check more than one. If you check other, you must be very specific and write in the reason. Okay. Finally, once all the data is done and collected, data gets entered into a SurveyMonkey link. We will send the link out as soon as possible. We don't have it yet. You can enter that data into the SurveyMonkey link, or you can send us the paper surveys and we will do it. Whether you enter the information in on your own or not, you must return all the paper surveys to me no later than Thursday, February 2nd. And that is to ensure that we have everything collected and that we have time to enter in anything that was not entered. You can scan them and email them. You can fax them. If you choose one of those options, you need to label each survey front and back so that we can collate them properly once they're printed, because believe it or not, things do not come through and print out in order all the time. So for example, if on John Smith's survey, you're going to put survey 1, page 1, and on the back or the second page, you'll put survey 1, page 2, so that we can put all those pages together. And we make sure we match the right page 1 to the right page 2. Okay, so scanning and faxing is acceptable. You can also drop off hard copies. I will put a box down on the main floor of our building. 2 Coming Home, 75 Bayard Street. We are on the 2nd floor, but we will put a box near security for surveys to be dropped off. Okay. I appreciate you guys attending. Yes, scanning and emailing is perfect. This is my email for questions. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're going to keep the recording going though. And Alicia, ask your question because I didn't understand it.
So the coordinated assessments, I understand Middlesex County is doing that as well. So I wanted to know, are we doing this in conjunction with the PIT assessments, or is it a difference? Is it a different time frame? Am I correct?
Totally different activities. The point in time assessment is not an assessment, it's a survey. It is essentially a census of individuals experiencing homelessness in our community on the night of January 24th. The coordinated assessment is an assessment of an individual who is open to you. And that is submitted to Coming Home as the coordinating assessment lead agency. It's just, luck that we happen to be the same agency running it in Middlesex County. And that is to assess their needs and vulnerabilities in order to determine what housing resources they may be eligible for in our community. So that is completely different. So the point in time assessments, you all should start doing the point in time assessments for individuals who are either on the streets or in shelter or in a hotel paid for by your agency, no later than, if you know, for example, Community Hope and Soldier On, that you have folks that you are paying for in hotel placement, you should be doing these surveys. You can start on the 24th because you know who's going to be in there, you're paying their bill, and completing it for everyone you have in hotel placement, as well as anyone that is open to you in any kind of housing crisis. And all surveys must be completed and returned to me no later than February 2nd. So you can do it over the course of a few days. You can also do street outreach. We will be hosting street outreach activities throughout that week. And hold on, Alex. If you want to join street outreach activities, email me separately. My email is in the PowerPoint multiple times. And we will sign you up to join a street outreach team. And that would be different maybe than your own agency activities. Your agency almost everyone on here interacts with individuals who experience housing crisis. You will do this survey for everyone that you interact with, open to you or not, that you encounter during the course of your work. Okay? They might be housed, but not stably housed. And so you can do a survey and you can submit it. Okay, so that is a significant difference from a coordinated assessment. And Alex, so if you are here and you are a permanent supportive housing provider, you only need to do a survey, not for people that are permanently housed, Alex. So if they're housed, you don't need to do the survey. Okay, but if maybe you have someone who's in the housing search process, or someone on your waiting list that did not come through the COC for your other housing options, and they are not stably housed, you could do it for them. But keep in mind, I only want Middlesex County surveys. If you operate in multiple counties, do not send me surveys for other counties. I don't want them.
I appreciate that.
I have enough.
That's half my wait list. Every other county.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're doing surveys for individuals who are undocumented. There will be a Spanish version. It will go out. You can return the surveys to me by scan and attach to an email. You can fax and you can drop them off. Any other questions? I think I got all those questions. That is a hard deadline, February 2nd. And so SSVF, everybody's got it? Soldier On and Community Hope. It's for every single person basically on your caseload. Okay. If you are a diversion staff or street outreach staff or PATH, Coming Home staff, it's basically every person on your caseload. Okay. You should have a survey for every single person. Okay. Christiana, can you please stop the recording?